Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where psychology and finances collide. And we'll continue to examine how we think, feel, and behave with money as it relates to financial intimacy. If you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2 of this episode, I would love for you to go back and listen so that you have all of the information before we get into this last leg. So we're going to kick it off with communication. We've talked a little bit about communication and the statistics that go along with that in the previous parts of this episode series. But here's what Fidelity found. We talked about Fidelity's research, their 2024 research here. And here's what they found. So those couples who communicate well are more likely to say that money is not their greatest relationship challenge. That would be 78% who are communicating well versus 51% who are not communicating well. So how is that related to financial intimacy? Well, communication is a huge part of that. How can you be intimate with one another if you're not communicating with one another? And by the way, we defined intimacy in the very first part of this episode series. A lot of folks, including my juvenile brain, whenever I hear intimacy, my mind automatically goes to physical intimacy. But intimacy, as it is defined, is more of a familiarity. It's a relationship dynamic where you share parts of yourself that you would not necessarily share with the masses. So this information, this communication is directly reserved for your spouse or that relationship that you're in where you're committed and you're on the brink of tying the knot. Commitment, by the way, is a very huge part of financial intimacy. Here's another thing they found. Those who communicate well are more likely to discuss their finances together at least monthly. And that, again, 78% versus 57% who are not communicating well. So those who are not communicating well are not discussing their finances together at least monthly. So when we get that communication going, that's definitely going to help. And listen, I like to say that there's no wrong way to communicate. Now, granted, the court system and the justice system might disagree with that. I mean, if you communicate with your fists or your body or withholding money, which, by the way, there are some episodes on economic abuse and financial abuse. I'll talk about that a little later. That's different. But when it comes to communication, a lot of people freeze because they don't think they have the right words, or they don't communicate as eloquently as their spouse or significant other. So that keeps them many times from actually even starting the conversation, or a fear that they'll be judged or the information will not be interpreted as well as they thought. The intended message was not received in that manner. So here's another one. Those who communicate well are more likely to expect to live a comfortable lifestyle in retirement. 65% versus 40% who were not communicating well. And then here's another one. Those who communicate well are more likely to rate their household's financial health as excellent or very good. And it's a lower number, it's 57%, but that's still versus 34% if you weren't communicating well. And every good therapist knows that you have to get a couple to a place where they even want to communicate. So I get it. You might say, Olivia, I've tried this financial intimacy thing. I've tried talking about my spouse, about money, but the defenses automatically go up and then a conversation never happens. Well, I want to challenge you on that. You've still communicated. So there is something that has happened, but maybe there wasn't enough follow-up in that time where you let the dust settle. So for example, if you have something that's been on your mind and you're wanting to bring that up with your spouse and you provide the information, the other spouse gets defensive and they walk away. We're going to talk about what that is in just a moment. Perhaps you haven't pursued that spouse in the right amount of time. Absolutely, it's a good idea to let them kind of rest a little bit and get to a place of letting them simmer down before you re-engage. There's a lot of utility in that and health in that. But if you're pursuing over and over and over again and not giving that person time to process or to settle, then maybe it's going to seem more like nagging than communicating. But we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. So we talked in the last episode about the differences between the generations. And communication is one thing, and if it were that easy, I'd be out of a job. Couples therapists would be out of a job. Several career fields would be out of a job if I just gave you the information and the data you needed, put you on your way, and expected you to do this completely and fully and without error. But that's not how communication works. So there's going to be some experimentation. You're going to get some things right. You're going to get some things wrong. But the point is that you just don't give up. I mean, do you give up in every other aspect of your marriage? Probably not. So there's a way to move towards these conversations and build that intimacy. And this goes back to just acknowledging that there are several ingredients that can go into the pie. We talked about pie in the first episode and what that means, because one of the reasons a lot of couples do not communicate about finances is because they have this fear they're not going to do it as well as their spouse, or they believe there's only one way to do it and they'll never be able to live up to it. But we have to remember that there are several ingredients that can go into that pie. Whether it's a pecan, chocolate, sweet potato, or apple pie, they're all sweet. There's not just the one preferred pie. Every pie in that segment, in that first part, as you'll hear, is sweet and has good things tied to it, but it may not be the preferred one. Here's what Fidelity says. Even with communication, money talks can be a challenge. And that is so true. And I'm glad that they validate that for folks. Let me go over the stats here when it comes to the generations. We talked a little bit about Gen Z and how they differ from baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials and what keeps them up at night. But this is a little different. And this is by generation. Nearly 1 in 4 couples say money is their greatest relationship challenge. And I can attest to that. There are 4 primary stressors within a marriage, and that includes money, sex, which is your physical intimacy, right? Children, and communication. Those are the 4 hot topics. So it makes sense that they're saying, hey, 25% are saying money is the greatest relationship challenge, where another 25% is going to say it's about sex, and the other 25% is going to say it's about communication, and the other 25% is going to say, oh, it's on parenting for sure. So they're all going to have different perceptions of what their greatest relationship challenge is. So here's what it looks like by generation. So for baby boomers, they had the lowest when it came to money being their greatest relationship challenge. Whereas Gen Z, millennials, and Gen Xers were at 26 to 29%, Gen Xers 26%, millennials 27%, and 29% reporting that money was their greatest relationship challenge. Only 17% of baby boomers said that money was their greatest relationship challenge. There's a reason for that. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. 45% of partners still say they argue about money at least occasionally. And that is not shocking whatsoever. If anything, arguments about money can be what propels you to do something different with your money. So let me go over the generational aspects here. Remember, Gen Zers, they're transitioning into adulthood. And so they're at 42%. They're saying that they argue about money occasionally. So this would be that closer to 18 age group that they've studied. The study was with 18-year-olds all the way up. And then you have your millennials at 47%, and they're in their child rearing developmental stage. So you got the money, parenting, all those things mixed together. And then Gen X, they're likely paying for college tuition or launching their young adult children. And so they have the highest at 49%. And then 39% of baby boomers, again, baby boomers are having the least struggle with both of these because of where they are in their developmental stage. So there's perceived and real struggle. And these struggles can build endurance and then ultimately character to get to where the baby boomers are now. So the more you live life, the more you endure the hardships, the more you endure the struggles, you will eventually be able to talk like your grandparents and say, hey, money's no longer an issue for us. We figured it out. And that can be a good thing. Not to say that your grandparents never still squabble about money. I'll share a funny story how arguments can lead to or propel us into something different. My husband and I were having a casual conversation about college savings. We are going to start planning college visits for my junior who's in high school. And he just made the simple point that, hey, I think instead of increasing or maximizing our TSP to the new 2026 percentage, perhaps we just keep it where it is now and increase our college savings. And I kind of snapped at him a little bit and said, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's what we need to do at all, because here's what's happening. Dana's likely to get a scholarship and this, and we don't want to keep putting money into a 529, and then we're basically building their retirement savings instead of giving them money for college. I mean, that's money that we lose, right? And I know that sounds awful, but I love my children, but I'm not here to set them up for retirement. I'm here to set them up for a foundational place for life. That's it. And then, they get to leave the nest and do what they want to do, which I think is great. But he came back and gave a couple numbers, and I was still just a little peed off. And he came back a couple days later. He's learned over the years, we've been married over 25 years, to let me settle just a little bit. And lo and behold, he pulls up the numbers. And that was exactly what I needed to see what he was trying to say. I needed a visual. And that was perfect, because then I finally understood what he was trying to say. And it did not make sense to increase our TSP. It only made sense to increase that portion of our savings for the college savings. And I appreciated that. He didn't come back and say, I told you so, or, this is why I win every argument. I mean, none of that ribbing or anything like that. It was more like, all you needed to see was the visual. He knew that I was a visual learner. Okay, so let's get back into communication. So Fidelity talks about these communication dynamics, and I would love to know. I would love to see their research design and who they brought into these studies, because it's so well done. Surely they had some therapists or psychologists helping them with this. And so here's what they found. More than 1 in 4 admit to often being frustrated by their partner's money habits, but let it go for the sake of keeping the peace. I know that I'm stepping on toes right now, and I'm not sorry, because this is going to help you build the confidence that you need to state what it is that's on your heart, on your mind, and just get it out in the open, because that's what communication is letting something be known. And it doesn't always have to be about what's bothering you. You can communicate about what's going well, what they're doing right. I mean, what a notion, right? To say out loud, catching your spouse doing something right and then telling them, hey, I really like that. That's what we did when we first started dating. And so why can't we do it now, right? So here's some more things that they found. And a lot of these we've already talked about. 53% disagree on how much savings is needed to reach retirement. 47% disagree on how much risk they are comfortable taking in their investments. And 34% disagree on their family's next big savings goal. But here's what's different. This one has not been revealed yet. 36% disagree on how much income their working partner makes. This was jaw-dropping for me, that they don't even know their partner's true income, that they disagree on what they're even bringing in. How does that happen? It's because they're not communicating, or they're not sharing intimacy or sharing information, which is a form of intimacy. Oh, that just bothered me so much. And then it reminded me of an episode we recently aired on suicide statistics. And this is going to be a little sobering. It does not suggest that if you're not communicating well with your partner, that either of you are going to complete suicide. But one of the statistics that they found in active duty members, which they said was not that far off from the general population, was that 44% of these active duty suicides, these active duty members reported intimate partner issues within the past year. I just need to pause on that. If we are admitting to being frustrated by our partner's money habits, but letting it go for the sake of keeping the peace, and we're not speaking up, and we don't even know how much money each one of us are bringing in, and we're not communicating about that, oh, that just makes me feel sad. And this is one of those things. Money is a huge issue within intimacy, and that is considered an intimate partner issue. So that's a heavy stat to give you some reference, and not to make you feel badly, but to propel you to do something differently. And that is to communicate about your finances and build financial intimacy. All right, so fidelity goes into financial harmony. For financial success, they're saying, hey, make money a team sport. And they said that overall, 55% of partners feel very good or excellent about their financial health. That made me smile. More than half of us are feeling good or excellent about our financial health. I love that. But yet, only half say they make financial decisions jointly. So that saddened me after the high of being happy. But 57% say they make day-to-day financial decisions jointly. That's great. And 55% say they make retirement and investment planning decisions jointly. So that made me smile again. That made me get back into a good feeling there. Those who make money decisions jointly are more likely to say they communicate well or very well with their partners, and more likely to feel confident in their partner's ability to assume full responsibility of planning for retirement and other long-term goals. So for those in a previous stat where they felt fearful of what would happen to them or their spouse should something happen, such as death or disability, or could be other things, that's the way to do it, is to communicate. What a notion, right? Okay, now we're going to get into the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And when I provided In my previous life as a clinician, I would see couples from time to time, and I would often call upon the Gottmans' teaching. And the Gottmans are noted, Doctors Julie and John Gottman, they are noted most of all as the love lab experts. They had a love lab in Seattle, Washington, and they just called it the Love Lab because they just had this apartment where they would watch couples. And of course, there were certain rooms that were off limits, so don't let your mind go there. But they would watch these couples interact with each other, and they could tell within the first 5 minutes with, I think it was something in the 90% accuracy, whether this couple would stay together or get a divorce. So with really high accuracy within the first 5 minutes. So what they found was, for those that were accurately found to divorce, the 4 primary things that they saw within the first 5 minutes of this relationship. And that's where they came up with the name, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It kind of is a foreshadowing of something ugly to come. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And let me go over what each one of those are. A person within a couple dynamic who is displaying criticism is attacking a partner's character or personality rather than addressing specific behaviors. What does that look like within the world of finances, Olivia? Well, it could be someone, and maybe they even heard this in the Love Lab. It would sound something like this. You're such a tightwad. So they're attacking a person's character or personality rather than just saying, hey, oh man, we came on this trip and I'm glad that we're here and we're having a great time in this research study. We got a free stay. And I understand that you don't want to go to the Space Needle and have dinner. But that was something I guess I didn't tell you that I was looking forward to, and so I didn't make my expectation clear, so I'm feeling a little disappointed that that's not something that you want to do. That's a completely different way of saying, hey, this is what I want to do. You're focusing on a behavior rather than the person's character or personality, which may not even be true, because perhaps this tightwad personality or character that you're describing is because they're just wanting to make sure that they don't go over budget that month. We don't know that, but that was just an example. So that's criticism. Here's contempt, where a partner exhibits expressing disdain or lack of respect, often through sarcasm or mockery. And one that I wrote down that I recalled from the several sessions I've had over the years and changing some things up for confidentiality. And I quote, well, I could retire early if I weren't married to a spender. I mean, it doesn't sound that horrible, but when you see that person shrink in the chair because the other person said that about him or her, oh, it's such a sad thing to behold. So there's lack of respect for the other person in the room, and you're being sarcastic or you're mocking that person. And remember what I always say, we don't want to necessarily call people names, whether we're calling them a spender or a saver. We need to find a reframe, and perhaps maybe they're defenders or protectors rather than tightwads or savers. And perhaps they are celebrators rather than spenders. So there are different ways to approach that. Defensiveness is the other horseman. So this is where a spouse responds to criticism with counterattacks or excuses rather than taking responsibility. So here's what that might sound like. Well, I wouldn't be in so much debt if Moneybags over here didn't have so many rules. We're criticizing and attacking this person because of their financial rules and financial boundaries. We're the one who racked up the debt, but we're blaming somebody else for it. So again, that's defensiveness, where we're responding to criticism and counterattacks rather than taking individual responsibility. And that is where I see most people, because I already said a lot of these financial talks that I'm working with in session, people become defensive so quickly. When we first start the session, there's laughter, there's, sharing of goals. And then when we get about a quarter way in, this is where that defensiveness starts to rear its ugly head, or as the Gottmans will say, you can hear the clip clop of the different horsemen coming into the room during this session. And defensiveness is the loudest one of all, at least when it comes to my financial marital sessions. Here's another one: stonewalling. And this is where the spouse withdraws from the conversation or shutting down emotionally, which can create distance in the relationship. And that's simply evident when someone walks away or gives the silent treatment. That's a form of stonewalling. It could be physical or it could be verbal and nonverbal. So there are many different forms of stonewalling. So someone could physically walk away or physically remain present, but still be out, still be not psychologically present. So there are different ways of viewing that. But I don't necessarily have something to give you that would be the counter of criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. But I do have one tried and true thing that can assist, even as the stats and research show continuously in this fidelity study. Communication. Now, in communication, there is going to be sometimes that criticism, contempt, and defensiveness and stonewalling, but to stay the course and continue communicating even when it gets hard, even when you hear the clip clop of those horsemen's feet, even when you don't want to stay physically present or psychologically present in the moment, you have this stick-to-itiveness and you don't back away, and you learn what is going on that can help me here. Now, granted, if you are someone who is not wanting to engage in communication because you are in an abusive relationship, that's a different thing. That's called self-preservation. And so I would encourage you to listen to season 4, episodes 17 through 19 to see if economic or financial abuse could be something in there, and how to go about finding ways to find the help that you need, or even a safety plan that you might need, so that you can move beyond and get to a place of financial independence. All right, so what can I do, Olivia? It's nice that you say, okay, communication is that surefire way of working through these 4 horsemen. And I get it. I understand that, it's probably something your mom, your dad, your friends, your different leaders in your life, different influencers in your life. You're like, man, I wish I could get it, but I still don't get it. So here's what you can do. I'll throw out some stuff. How about schedule a money date? And this is a way to build that financial intimacy. This is what my husband and I did, because remember, I told you that I kind of snapped at him a little bit when he said we needed to increase college savings over TSP. And so what he did was he scheduled a time for us. We knew we needed to look at everything. And so we did that over the weekend. And it was just a wonderful thing that he was able to show me visually what he was talking about. And also, when we have our regular outings without the kids, a lot of times we intentionally bring up finances and celebrate the wins and talk about what's going well. And I will tell you that when you focus on what your spouse is doing right, then they are more likely to engage in more of these conversations as time goes on. And I know that we can't necessarily have communication all the time that is free from any kind of tension or stress. And I would actually say that probably communication is not effective if it doesn't involve some level of tension. I don't want you to feel like you need to just stop or quit if you do start to feel that tension. Just kind of work through it. And I would say do this at least monthly. Gather your data, gather your information, go over the monthly budget. Who's going to track this month? Listen to that episode on delegating financial burnout and which one of those skill sets is meeting your motivational skills rather than more of the burnout skill for you. Those are the things you can discuss and maybe switch it up a little bit. I mean, intimacy requires that from time to time. And then use your professional resources. When you have some level of educator or counselor, advisor, or therapist that is in there with you, it's someone that becomes another accountability partner and someone also that can be there to actually earn the right to speak financial truths into your life. But consumer beware. I'm talking about a bona fide professional here. I'm not talking about an influencer on YouTube or Insta or TikTok or even Google searches or Reddit where you can find anything that would massage your ego and agree with you. I'm talking about bona fide professionals. Not necessarily all those things. And yeah, podcasts are great. And I think my podcast is okay and it's educational, but I'm not the one who is being financially intimate with you. You need to learn this and speak with the person that you are being financially intimate with about this. Not information from your mom's Facebook post or other people that would otherwise be questionable in what kind of advice they might have for you. So remember to use your resources. And you might be employed with an employer that has these resources that are low cost or no cost for you. I know that within the Army, we have military and family life counselors that are available to active duty members and their family members. We have the Employee Assistance Program where you can talk to a counselor about any stressor in your life. For Department of Army civilians, it's a free service. And then you don't even get a diagnosis, so it's not even something that you need to worry about for your security clearance. You could talk to a thrift savings professional or any other benefits advisor to get true financial information from the horse's mouth. The legal office, you might have an attorney or with your company that is low or no cost. Or here at Redstone Arsenal, if you're active duty or military retiree, you can get free estate planning here at our legal office. And they might even have different offerings at other installations. But making sure that you're even talking to your tax professional. A lot of people don't even think about using their tax professional as a resource. But if it's an enrolled agent or a certified public accountant, many times they are steeped in tax code and have to have continuing education to remain abreast of all the changes and give you some information that is tried and true. So that's my encouragement. After all three of these episodes, I really hope for you that you can increase your financial intimacy with your spouse and with your children and help each other build a better financial future. Thanks for listening, and please be sure to rate and review the pod wherever you listen.